Here's a quick video tutorial for assembling the pinwheel block of the sparkler pillow pattern. I recommend cutting out the labels that are provided within the pattern or your own method of marking each piece, as the sizes are different and you don't want to get confused when you start to lay them out. I am going to start with one of the pinwheel squares. It doesn't matter which one you start with. They will all be constructed in the same manner. For this demonstration, it will be one of the fabric A1 pieces. So you will take your square and fold it into a triangle. You can either finger press this fold or you can press with your iron. So now you have a triangle, and with the open ends facing away from you, the folded edge facing you, take this corner and you will simply match it to the opposite corner. And again, finger press or use your iron to press. And then while I am folding the rest of the triangles, I always put the clip back in, and I'm also going to put the label back on just so that I keep everything organized and put together. But this is what one finished pinwheel will look like. You made a triangle and then you brought one end of the triangle up to the top edge of the triangle. I'm going to repeat this for the rest of the remaining pinwheel triangles. Here's now you should have 4 pinwheel units. 2 of them will be a little bit smaller than the other 2. Next, you'll take your fabric B squares. There should be 4 of them, and you're going to lay them out in a 2x2 grid. With your fabric B squares laid out in a 2x2 grid, you will place each pinwheel unit on one corner of the blue squares. And it's very important that you follow the directions in the pattern as far as placement. I have marked them on the label as to where you will place them. So for A1 pinwheel units, those will be on the upper and lower left sides. You want the raw edges to align with the corner and just meet them together. And then I just put a clip in it until I'm ready to sew. And then I will do the lower section, which is also fabric A1. This one is going to face this way. And again, you're just lining up the raw edges. So the folded edges will be facing the inside of the square, and the raw edges will be lining up with the raw edge of the fabric B square. And then you have the fabric A2 pinwheel section, and that's the upper and lower right sides. And this one, the upper right faces, it lines up with the raw edges of the square. Again, your folded, creased are facing towards the center of the square, and the raw edges are lining up. And you can kind of, to make sure you're doing it the right way, you can stand back and see, does it look kind of like a pinwheel? It should have a pinwheel type look to it or motion to it. That one didn't clip properly. And then the bottom one, which is also A2, will go this direction. And you're just lining up raw edges. Again, folded creases are towards the center of fabric B. And then clip it. The next step is to sew the pinwheel units to your fabric B square. And I just sew along, I guess, the longer raw edge at about 1/8 of an inch. Don't sew it at 1/4 inch because that's going to be the seam allowance that we're going to use for putting the block together. This is just basically to get this to stick to the fabric B square. So I just sew about 1/8 of an inch, and it can even be a longer stitch length, even a basting stitch length. I just sew that on there, and I will do that for each pinwheel unit section, just sewing along the longer raw edge of the pinwheel, if that makes sense. So we're going to sew 1/8 of an inch here, 1/8 of an inch here, 1/8 of an inch here, and 1/8 of an inch there, meaning 1/8 of an inch is the seam allowance that you're going to use to sew the pinwheel unit to the fabric B square. Then I highly recommend that you figure out a way to make sure that you keep these units in the correct format, because these two pinwheel units are longer than these two, and that is very important in placement and construction of the pillow. So however you can remember that this is A1 and this is A1 and this is A2 and this is A2, do your best to figure out a system so that you don't confuse any of these, because this is how the placement must go. This is to show you what I meant about just basting this pinwheel unit to your fabric B square. You just want to make sure that the raw edges are aligned. And then you're just going to sew with a longer stitch length. I'm using a 4mm and 1/8 of an inch away from the raw edge. And it's just literally to get that pinwheel unit onto the fabric B square. So as you can see, I just literally, I just want it to stick on there so I don't need to continually use a clip. And I'm going to do that for all of the pinwheel units, like I said. Sew along the long raw edge of the pinwheel unit, and that's all you need to do. And then it will stick to the fabric, and then you continue constructing the pinwheel block. Now that you have your pinwheel units basted to your fabric B squares, you are ready to construct the pinwheel block. As I stated, you need to figure out a way to make sure that all of the pinwheel units are in the right space. These 2 units are your fabric A1. These 2 units are your A2. These 2 are a little bit bigger than these 2, and you can get a ruler and see that your A2 pieces, they, at the end of the long raw edge, from that point of the triangle to the edge of the B square, it's a 1/4 inch for your A2. For your A1, it's a 1/2 inch. So if somehow you mix them up and you can't remember what is what, you can refer to that to figure out the correct placement. Now you're ready to construct your pinwheel block, and it's very simple. You're just going to sew this row together, this row together. You'll press the seams open, and then you'll sew those 2 units together, and you're done. So the easiest way I do it is I take and fold over and just align this side. So it'll look like this when it's lined up ready to be sewn. And so you're just going to sew a 1/4 inch on the top unit and a 1/4 inch for the bottom unit, and then you're going to press the seams open. Okay, so I've gone ahead and sewn these units together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to open it up. You can see it likes to flop around, and I'm just going to press the seam open. So I lay it down with the right sides facing down, wrong side facing up, and I'm just going to open that seam up so that I can get my iron in there. And then I just press it open. This helps to reduce the bulk. I've made several of these in testing for this pattern, and this is what has worked best for me. As I always say in my classes, you do you. If you think pressing to one side is going to work better for you, go for it. And then you just want to make sure that that is, each little pinwheel unit is facing the right way. And then we do that for the bottom section as well. Same thing, just press it open. So make sure that the unit, the pinwheels are sitting the way they should. And then you're just going to press the seam open. And then press it down. And by this point, you should be able to figure out which goes where, because it should look like a pinwheel. Now all you do is take the upper and lower section and place them right sides together. Since that seam is open, it's fairly easy to line up those seams. You just want to make sure that the seams match. And then I will take a pin and pin it in there in the middle. And then if you are needing a little bit of extra assistance, you could clip or pin along, but this is all I do, and then I just take and I sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance along this edge. So I sewed the 1/4 inch seam along the middle, and then this is what it looks like after it's been sewn together. I like to press this seam open as well, so just making sure that the pinwheel is flat when you're doing that. And just get those seams to open and press. Right here where all the bulk is, it can be a little tricky, but it'll work. You can do it. There we go. And then flip over and you have a completed pinwheel. Completed 3D pinwheel. After you've completed the pillow, you can always go in and fluff those parts up just to give it more of the 3D effect. But I mean, you can see it's not sewn down, so it just hangs loose. It's a nice little visual for the pillow. Now, if you were not careful in remembering which unit is which, you can always go and measure as it shows in the pattern. Measure the edge of your pinwheel tip to the edge of the blue or the B square to make sure you have it aligned the proper way. Also, make sure you trim this down if needed to the size in the pattern, and then you're ready to continue with sewing the stripes. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is in the pattern, or you can contact me and leave a comment in this video. If you liked what you saw here, please make sure to subscribe, and I'll have more tutorials for you. Again, thanks so much for purchasing the Sparkler Pillow pattern. I hope you enjoy it.